Today's video is going to be both a non-spoiler review and then a spoiler chat for Nightmare of the Wolf. Most of you know, but if you're new here, my background with Witcher is that I played The Wild Hunt, loved it, read all of the books, then anxiously awaited season 1 of the Netflix show, watched that, had meh feelings, but was very excited for what was a movie. I thought for some reason that this Vesemir prequel was going to be a show. And so that's kind of the first thing I want to dive into, which was my expectations going into this. I was so excited because Witcher in general, I thought would have worked really well animated. And so when I saw Nightmare of the Wolf, I was so excited. And I was especially excited because of the fact that Castlevania did quite well for Netflix, and I was thinking we were going to get this show because since Castlevania did well, we were going to have this new Witcher content that, like the video games, is not necessarily canon, but you sort of kind of can treat it like it because it comes before the books. It even had the Hector voice actor from Castlevania. The animation reminded me a little bit of it. There were a couple of times that it almost felt like a copy of Castlevania. For example, the medallion having the chain was definitely very much like Trevor, but I wasn't complaining. I was very excited about it, but it ended up being a movie, and thus I think that I was not as excited when I realized it was going to be a movie. I will get into the negatives, but I want to start primarily with the positives before being a little harsh on this. So the positives, one, is that I did really like the animation style. I'm so sorry for those of you who haven't watched Castlevania. If you are curious about it, I'll link my review for it in the description bar down below. But I like this animation style. I like it's somewhat simple, but the fight scenes look amazing. The movement of the characters is really amazing. I like the color choices. In general, I just think that the animation style is really cool, and so I was definitely a big fan of that. I also really liked so many of the voice actors that they chose. I thought they had phenomenal accents. I thought that the delivery of a lot of the lines was really good. Didn't always love the dialogue, but we'll get to that. And then I really appreciated that they took a lot of risks and they had some cool themes and concepts throughout. I will say that the execution of a lot of those ended up being a negative, but some of the liberties that they took with the story, I actually could kind of see fitting in the Witcher world. They were basing this primarily off of a barely there portion of the backstory of Kaer Morhen. So they had the freedom to do things differently here and kind of fill in the blanks. So I couldn't be too hard on them for taking some of these liberties, and I'm always a fan of people taking a shot at things that are a little bit different, taking some risks, which they definitely did. I don't want to spoil, I'll talk about this in the spoiler portion, I don't want to spoil some of what they decided to do, but I thought it was actually kind of interesting. When I first was thinking about it, I was like, I don't know if I like this, but I did appreciate a lot of what they were trying to hit. Our main character, Vesemir, also is somebody who is trying to better himself, but is kind of getting consumed with this idea that what originally started as a very pure intention of providing for himself and those he cares about kind of turns into an obsession and can become a negative thing. And I liked seeing that tackled. I liked bringing more life to the character of Vesemir. I like seeing young Vesemir. So conceptually, I was a big fan of it. I liked a lot of what they went to do. I just didn't really like how they went about it. So that kind of leads us into the negatives. I think most of my negatives could have been erased if this had just been longer. I won't even go as far as to say it should have been a show with multiple seasons, but I do think either a single season show or just a longer movie, because an hour 23 minutes, I believe, was the runtime, is pretty short for movies nowadays, and this absolutely, in my opinion, would have benefited from being longer. There was just so many things that they tapped into that needed more time. The relationship between the characters, I would have cared so much more if I had seen more time with characters together. I would have cared so much more about Vesemir, because Vesemir is a character we don't know a whole lot about, especially in the books, but in the games you get some of Vesemir, but either way, you don't see him that much. And so this was a great opportunity. We already kind of like him. He's that wise mentor figure. So a lot of us who are already fans like this character, and you could have done so much with him. You even could have changed him for the most part because he's young, so that he could have been somebody who eventually turns into this wise mentor. But I just didn't feel like we got a whole lot of time with Vesemir. I also felt like Vesemir, I was thinking about it and I was like, I wonder if he even was the voice actor that had the most lines because I swear he didn't talk that much. I don't feel like we got that much of him, of this amazing voice actor. I don't feel like we got that much of him. And it's a whole movie about Vesemir, and it didn't feel like there was that much Vesemir in it. They also, in my opinion, just tried to have too many Witcher things in this, but kind of just scratching the surface of those things, and I think it could have really been so much harder hitting had we actually taken more time with it. So for example, they allude to elven conflict. They don't just allude to, I mean, they show some things that have to do with the elves, and that's a big thing in the Witcher world, is this tense relationship, or sometimes violent relationship and hateful relationship between humans and elves, or humans and witchers, or witchers and elves. And there's so much between all of these different groups that I think that when they tried to show, okay, well, you hate the witchers, but you've done terrible things to the elves, and the reason you hate the elves is for the same, all these different threads that they were opening, there were subtleties that they could have expanded on a little bit more, especially because this is a prequel to everything, and so I think this would have been a good opportunity to show more of that. And as a result of not getting more of those sorts of things, I just think it left a lot of the plot threads not really being as emotionally taxing when it really could have been. A lot of the things that they did, I was like, I would have been really heartbroken here, or I would have felt very conflicted about, oh, I don't really like what they're doing, but I get why they're doing it. All those feelings, I could see that if this had been longer, I probably would have felt all those things, but because it was so short, because we got so little time with these characters, I just didn't come away from it feeling that much. I also felt like the ending really was, I was bummed about it because I was thinking, okay, I'm so sorry to keep comparing things to Castlevania, but with Castlevania, the first season is short and kind of weak. It's just a giant setup for the rest of the show, or more so a setup for season 2. And I was thinking, okay, maybe this movie will be kind of like a setup, gets me intrigued, and then they'll give me another movie, or they'll give me a full first season or something like that. But the ending, which I don't want to spoil, but the ending kind of makes me think they've closed the door on the Vesemir story. This was just a prequel so that we can introduce some of these things in the second season of the live action. And I was a little disappointed in that because I would have, even not totally loving this movie, I would have absolutely gone with them to explore Vesemir more. And now I feel like we don't get to do that. A quick thing, I also feel like the dialogue at times was pretty weak, or there would be certain lines that just didn't really make sense to the context of what was happening. There's one part where the sorceress Tetra is communicating with another woman. They're kind of just the two of them going back and forth. And I swear this scene was just Tetra. It was like they needed to get all of her grievances out. And so her sentences did not seem like they fit together at all. She would be talking about, this is why I hate the Witchers. Let me talk about your dead husband. Also, and it was just like one thing just right into the next, and the segues to me were not the strongest. And then also, sometimes characters who don't have established relationships whatsoever would have lines as if they had established relationships. So there's a part where the character Vesemir and the sorceress Tetra are fighting something. They aren't exactly pals. They're not necessarily characters that have been involved with one another for a long time and have this strong relationship or this frenemies relationship or something, but this monster goes to attack them, and Vesemir says something along the lines of like, oh, yeah, she has that effect on everybody. And I'm like, you just met her. What do you... It's not like you guys have been chilling for episodes and episodes. It's not like you have a history together. So that line, I was like, what? And I don't know. I was joking with my husband that it almost feels like they just pulled some lines from Castlevania and then just threw them into here since it was the same voice actor. I know they didn't do that, but some of the dialogue just wasn't the strongest. It was also sometimes really on the nose. Immediately I knew some of the twists and turns that they were trying to throw out, and it wasn't very subtle. And then the last thing before we get into spoilers, I think that the main thing that is helpful to know before you go into this, if you haven't watched it yet, I truly don't know who their audience was for this, or at what point in engaging with Witcher content they think that this should fit, because it seemed like it was too fan specific to start, because chronologically it's taking place before the events of the live action show with Henry Cavill. So you could argue, oh, this would be a good place to start, except for I really think there are some things in there that are hard to follow, and if you don't already have knowledge of the Witcher world and how a lot of things work in it, then you're probably going to be a little lost. I also think, again, they crammed too much all into one, so another reason to maybe be a little bit lost. But I definitely felt like I had a little bit more helping me because I have this history and love of Witcher. But I don't think that it's a great place for people who are new to Witcher. And then I also felt like there were some obvious things that if you are a fan of Witcher did not need to be included, like saying the medallions hum, or just other things that if you're a Witcher fan, that they were including, which was confusing to me because I'm like, I already know this, and this feels like it's for me. It feels like I'm your target audience. But now you're throwing in things for people that maybe are newbies, except for I don't know. I don't think they really always had decided. It seemed as if they were trying to appeal to people who are new and people who are already fans. And as a result, it just felt kind of clunky and awkward at times. Getting into just a few spoilers here. So if you don't want to be spoiled for anything, definitely click off. But jumping into the spoilers now, the main thing that I actually, at first I did not like, and then I thought about it, I'm like, okay, that's fine, I guess, was the reason for why they went after Kaer Morhen, which is that the Witchers were creating monsters so they could continue on with their profession. I was not sure how I felt about that. I think such a core thing of Witcher is this theme of people will hate you because they don't understand you. And I almost feel like that theme is taken away when you decide actually Witchers have a pretty legitimate reason to have people hate them. I mean, creating these monstrosities so that you can charge people a lot of money to kill those things. You're the only people who can kill those things, and then you go live with a lot of riches because you're charging people so much, and you have this kind of luxurious life when everybody else is struggling and trying not to be killed by these monsters. Yeah, I kind of get why people might want to harm them. I think the gray morality came in with the idea that not all the Witchers, most of the Witchers were not aware of this happening, but I still think that such a strong thing about Witcher is that theme I mentioned before. So I understand why they went about it. It seems fitting to the Witcher world because there are a lot of pretty terrible people. The Witchers aren't exactly super nice all the time. It's not like you have amazing Witchers who are all heroic. In fact, that's another theme of it, is that, yeah, they know even if they try to be nice and even if they try to be heroic, people are going to hate them anyway. So they kind of just do their own thing. They charge people and then they go about their business. So I go back and forth. I think it kind of makes sense that there would be somebody who might try to do this, but I do think it almost undermines the really strong points that Sapkowski hits in his books. One thing I liked quite a bit, at first I was like, what's the point of this? And then I actually did like it. The whole Vesemir, his past, him growing up, I at first thought, this is not important. I do not need child Vesemir. I don't need to see the little girl he had a crush on or whatever. I didn't need to see it. But I did really appreciate that tie-in that the older woman was the same person. I liked that. I was like, okay, that was a pretty good decision. It also was a great way to show how Witchers don't really age. I think that was brilliant because that's something that you could just tell us, but then to show us literally Vesemir still looking like a stud and then she's this like sweet old lady. I thought that was really well done. But, as I said in the non-spoiler portion, if I'd had more time with these characters, I would have been so much more devastated at everything that happened. Her dying, and I just, there were so many things that happened. I didn't care when any of the other Witchers were killed. I didn't really find it that sad. I feel like the idea of her dying was sad, but then when she actually died, I was like, all right. It was sad. The big spoiler, though, the whole it was Geralt at the end. I want to know, first off, did it bother anybody a little bit? Because I mean, the whole thing with Geralt is that his mother was a sorceress. That's kind of a big reveal because with him and Yennefer, there's this idea that, oh, they can't have children, and then you find out some sorceresses can, and then his own mother was one, but she gave him... I mean, Vesemir kind of is the one that took Geralt to Kaer Morhen originally. So this idea that Geralt was just like, oh, there, that one's Geralt, and I don't know, I feel like it was supposed to be like, oh my gosh, cool, and I didn't think it was very cool. The snobby book fan was like, that's not how it went though. And again, it shuts the door. I wanted more Vesemir's story. And really what this was how Kaer Morhen was destroyed and how all of these secrets of the Trial of the Grasses and everything like that, how all of that was destroyed. That is one other spoiler thing that I want to mention was the Trial of the Grasses. I get that we don't necessarily know all that much about it, but I didn't really love how they chose to depict the Trial of the Grasses. I feel like the main thing is that the mutations are just mutations that the kids don't always survive. Ultimately, I appreciated that they took the time to try to develop this character a little more. I'm just appreciative in general that we get these fantasy adaptations. I hope we get more animated things moving forward. But I don't know, maybe I can hold out hope that we'll get Regis or something because I was so excited for this Vesemir adaptation. And it was, I didn't come away from it loving it, which makes me a little sad. Definitely let me know your thoughts on Nightmare of the Wolf. If you do want to add spoilers, just write spoilers in your comment and then enter a bunch of times so that nobody is spoiled. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.